36-year-old Ethan Carter hadn't smiled much since his wife, Rachel, died 5 years earlier in a devastating highway accident outside Denver. She had been pregnant with their unborn daughter. Since then, Ethan had poured every ounce of his energy into raising his 7-year-old son, Noah, alone. Every Saturday, father and son visited Maplewood Park in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. It was their tradition. No phones. No work. Just baseball, sandwiches, and laughter. Ethan worked as a firefighter, a career that left little room for grief. He had learned to hide it beneath calm eyes and gentle smiles. One cool October afternoon, Noah ran toward the playground while Ethan sat on a bench drinking coffee. His flannel sleeve rolled slightly upward. The tattoo on his forearm became visible. It was small. A compass. Inside the compass was one tiny lavender flower. Rachel had designed it herself. The compass represented finding your way home. The flower represented hope. No one else in the world had that exact design. Or so Ethan believed. Then he heard tiny footsteps. 4 little girls, identical quadruplets, around 6 years old, stood in front of him. Each wore matching gray beanies and green jackets. The smallest one pointed excitedly. "Mr. Ethan smiled. "Hi there." She tugged her sister's sleeve. "See?" Another girl looked closely at Ethan's arm. "Our mommy has that tattoo." Ethan laughed politely. "A compass?" The oldest shook her head. "No. The flower too. The exact same one." Ethan's smile disappeared. His heartbeat slowed. "What did you say?" "Our mom says it's special. She never lets anyone touch it." The girls nodded together. "It's exactly like yours." For the first time in years, Ethan felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Ethan's heart pounded so loudly he barely noticed Noah calling from the playground. The 4 little girls had already wandered toward the monkey bars, laughing as though they hadn't just turned his entire world upside down. He stood slowly, unable to take his eyes off them. "It can't be!" Rachel had drawn that tattoo herself on a napkin during a road trip through Colorado. She had taken the sketch to a tiny tattoo studio in Denver, and Ethan had gotten it on his forearm. Rachel had promised she would get the same one after the baby was born. But she never had the chance. Or so Ethan believed. Before he could think any further, a woman's voice echoed across the park. "Emma Lily! Grace, Sophie! Stay where I can see you!" The girls turned instantly. "Mom?" A tall blonde woman hurried toward them, balancing a diaper bag over one shoulder and carrying a grocery sack in the other. She looked exhausted, but her smile lit up the autumn afternoon. "I'm so sorry," she said to Ethan. "They love talking to everyone." Ethan barely heard her apology. His eyes had locked onto her left forearm. As she reached for the youngest girl, her sweater sleeve slid upward. There it was, a compass. Inside it, the same tiny lavender flower. Ethan felt every ounce of color drain from his face. The woman noticed him staring. Instinctively, she pulled her sleeve down. "You okay?" she asked. Ethan swallowed. "I'm sorry if this sounds strange." He slowly rolled up his own sleeve. The woman's eyes widened. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The girls looked from one adult to the other in complete confusion. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you get that tattoo?" "I should be asking you." She hesitated before answering. "My name is Claire Bennett." "Ethan Carter." She nodded politely, though her expression remained guarded. "I got mine almost 8 years ago." Ethan frowned. 8 years? "Yes." "Who designed it?" Claire looked away. "I honestly don't know. It was a gift." Ethan blinked. "A gift?" She took a slow breath. "When I was 24, I was diagnosed with leukemia." Ethan remained silent. "I spent almost a year in St. Mary's Hospital. The treatments were brutal. There were days I wanted to quit. The only person who kept visiting me wasn't family. It was another patient. A young woman named Rachel." The name hit Ethan like a freight train. His knees nearly buckled. Claire continued softly. "She was pregnant. She talked about her husband every single day. She said he was a firefighter." Tears instantly filled Ethan's eyes. Claire looked at him carefully. "Wait, your wife?" Ethan nodded. "Rachel Carter." Claire covered her mouth. Oh my God! For a long moment, the busy park seemed to disappear around them. Children laughed. Leaves drifted through the air. Dogs barked in the distance. But Ethan could hear only Rachel's name echoing in his mind. Claire wiped tears from her cheeks. Rachel told me she had designed a tattoo. She said it reminded her that people always find their way home. She drew it on a piece of paper for me. I told her if I survived cancer, I'd wear it forever. Ethan closed his eyes. Rachel had never mentioned Claire. Not once. Claire smiled sadly. Before I left the hospital, Rachel hugged me. She told me something I'll never forget. If I don't get the chance to keep spreading hope, promise me you will. Claire looked toward her 4 daughters. I've spent every day trying to keep that promise. Ethan stared at the little girls laughing together on the swings. For the first time in 5 years, instead of feeling only grief when he heard Rachel's name, he felt pride. Because even after she was gone, her kindness had never stopped changing lives. Ethan and Claire sat on opposite ends of the same park bench, while the 5 children played, together as though they had known one another for years. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with memories. Finally, Claire broke it. There was one thing Rachel asked me to do if anything ever happened to her. Ethan looked up. What was it? Claire reached into her purse and slowly removed a small, worn leather journal. Its edges were faded from years of use. I've carried this with me for almost 8 years. Ethan's breath caught. The journal looked painfully familiar. Rachel had always written in little notebooks. She carried one everywhere, to coffee shops, on road trips, even to doctor's appointments. Claire carefully opened the first page. Inside, written in Rachel's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Hope grows when it's shared." Ethan gently traced the letters with trembling fingers. I never knew this existed, he whispered. Claire smiled sadly. Rachel started writing it during chemotherapy. Not for herself, for other patients. Ethan frowned. She had chemotherapy? Claire nodded. Only briefly. She told me the doctors found a rare blood disorder during her pregnancy. It wasn't cancer. But the treatments left her weak. She said she wasn't afraid of dying. She was only afraid her child would grow up without knowing how much she was loved. Ethan lowered his head. Rachel had hidden so much from him. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she wanted him focused on preparing for their baby's arrival, instead of worrying about her. Claire continued. Before I left the hospital, Rachel handed me this journal. She asked me to add 1 story every year. A story about someone who chose kindness. I've been doing it ever since. She turned the pages. Each year held another handwritten story. A teacher buying winter coats for students. A truck driver rescuing a family during a blizzard. A teenager donating part of his liver to a stranger. A nurse who worked every Christmas so others could stay home. The journal had become a collection of hope. Then Claire stopped at the final blank page. I've never known what to write here. Ethan stared at the empty sheet. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what belonged there. Just then, Noah came running toward them. Dad? Behind him were the 4 girls. Dad, Noah said, smiling. They invited me to build a treehouse with them someday. Claire laughed. They've already decided you're their new best friend. The girls nodded enthusiastically. Ethan looked at the 5 children standing together. Different families, different stories, yet somehow connected by one woman who believed kindness could outlive her. He closed the journal gently. I think Rachel already wrote the last page. Claire tilted her head. What do you mean? Ethan smiled through tears. She didn't leave it blank because she forgot. She left it blank because she wanted someone else to continue the story. Claire's eyes filled with tears. That afternoon, they visited Rachel's grave together for the first time. The children picked wildflowers along the path and carefully laid them beside the headstone. Noah quietly whispered, Hi, Mom. I wish I could have met you. The 4 little girls stood beside him, each placing a tiny purple flower on the grass. Claire looked at the headstone and softly said, You kept your promise, Rachel. You never stopped spreading hope. As the sun began to set, Ethan realized something remarkable. For 5 years, he had visited Rachel's grave carrying only grief. That evening, he walked away carrying something else. Purpose. And deep inside, he felt that Rachel's story was only beginning. The weeks after that afternoon in Maplewood Park passed quickly. What had started as one unexpected conversation turned into an unlikely friendship. Every Saturday, Ethan, Noah, Claire, and her 4 daughters met at the same park. The children became inseparable. Emma and Noah built elaborate forts from fallen branches. Lily insisted Ethan judge every hopscotch competition. Grace loved listening to his funny stories from the fire station. Little Sophie simply held his hand wherever they walked. For the first time in years, Ethan's weekends no longer felt lonely. One chilly November morning, Claire called him. "Ethan, I need your help." Her voice trembled. "What's wrong?" "I was cleaning out my attic and I found something with your name on it." An hour later, Ethan arrived at Claire's home. On the dining room table sat a small wooden box wrapped in a faded blue ribbon. Across the lid, written in Rachel's handwriting, were 4 words. "For Ethan, someday." His hands began to shake. "I've never opened it," Claire said softly. "Rachel asked me to keep it safe. She said if life ever brought me to the man she loved, I'd know it was time." Ethan could barely breathe. With tears in his eyes, he untied the ribbon. Inside were 3 things. The first was a tiny knitted baby blanket Rachel had made during her pregnancy. Ethan recognized every stitch. She used to knit while they watched old movies together. The second item was a silver key attached to a tag. The tag read, "Safety Deposit Box 214. The third item was a sealed envelope. On the front were the words, "Only open when you're ready to smile again." Ethan stared at it for a long time. "I don't know if I am," he whispered. Claire gently squeezed his shoulder. "I think Rachel knew exactly when you would be." Taking a deep breath, Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, then life has surprised you again. Knowing you, you've probably spent years blaming yourself for things that were never your fault. Please stop. You gave me a lifetime of love in far too few years. That was enough. I need one promise from you. Don't spend the rest of your life visiting my grave. Spend it making memories with people who still need your smile. If someone wonderful ever walks into your life, don't feel guilty for loving again. Love isn't replaced. It grows. And if there are children laughing around you, that's exactly where I hoped you'd be. Promise me you'll keep living. Love always. Rachel?" By the time Ethan finished reading, tears streamed down his face. Claire was crying too. "So that's why she left it with you," Ethan said. Claire nodded. She must have believed our paths would cross one day. The following week, Ethan used the silver key to open the safety deposit box Rachel had mentioned. Inside wasn't money or jewelry. Instead, he found dozens of sealed envelopes. Each one was labeled with a future milestone she had dreamed of sharing. For Noah's first day of school. For his 10th birthday. For the day he falls in love. For my grandchildren, if I'm lucky enough to have them. Rachel had written letters for a future she knew she might never see. That evening, Ethan gathered Noah, Claire, and the 4 girls around the fireplace. He read Rachel's letter aloud. When he finished, the room was silent. Then little Sophie looked up at Ethan with innocent eyes. "Your wife sounds like my favorite superhero." Everyone laughed through their tears. Ethan smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. For the first time since Rachel's passing, he understood what she had wanted all along. Not for him to forget her, but for him to keep living with the same kindness and love she had shared so freely. As snow began to fall outside, the children pressed their hands against the window, cheering at the first flakes of winter. Ethan looked around the warm, laughter-filled room. His family didn't look the way he had once imagined. It looked different. Unexpected, beautiful, and somewhere deep in his heart, he felt Rachel's final gift had never been the letters. It was the courage to open his heart again. Winter settled over Maplewood, covering the streets in a blanket of snow. By Christmas, Ethan and Noah had become part of Claire's family's holiday traditions. The children decorated cookies together, built snowmen in the backyard, and argued over who got to place the star on top of the Christmas tree. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't dread the holidays. Rachel's letters had changed him. One evening, after reading another letter written for Noah's future, Ethan looked at Claire and said, "I think Rachel wanted us to do more than remember her." Claire smiled. "I've been thinking the same thing." She reached into the leather journal Rachel had started years ago. "There are hundreds of stories in here now, but they're hidden on these pages. What if we shared them with the world?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "What are you thinking?" Claire pointed to the first page. "Hope grows when it's shared." "Let's make that more than a sentence." Within weeks, they rented a small storefront that had once been an old bookstore in downtown Maplewood. Friends from Ethan's fire station volunteered to repaint the walls. Neighbors donated books, furniture, and coffee makers. Local artists filled the empty shelves with handmade crafts. By early spring, they opened a place unlike anything the town had ever seen. Above the entrance hung a simple wooden sign, "The Compass House." Underneath it in smaller letters, "Hope grows when it's shared." The building wasn't a business. Everything inside was free. Families could pick up children's books. Job seekers could get help writing resumes. Single parents could enjoy a free meal every Friday night. Retired teachers volunteered as tutors. Counselors donated their time. The fire department hosted safety classes. Doctors offered free health screenings once a month. It quickly became the heart of the community. Every visitor who came through the doors was invited to write one story of kindness in a new journal. Soon there were dozens of journals, then hundreds. One afternoon, a television reporter from Chicago arrived. "I've covered charities all over Illinois," she told Ethan. "But I've never seen anything like this." "What inspired you?" Ethan glanced at Rachel's framed photograph hanging on the wall. It all started with one woman who believed kindness doesn't end when a life does. The story aired nationwide. Within days, donations poured in from every corner of America. Teachers mailed handwritten stories from Texas. Firefighters from California sent children's books. A widow in Maine donated enough money to pay every utility bill for the center's first year. A group of high school students in Ohio started their own Compass House chapter. The movement spread farther than Ethan ever imagined. One Saturday morning, while volunteers unpacked boxes of donated toys, Noah walked over carrying Rachel's journal. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I think Mom would like this place." Ethan smiled. "I think she already does." Just then, little Sophie tugged on Ethan's jacket. "There's someone asking for you." Standing in the doorway was an elderly man wearing a worn military jacket. He held an envelope in one hand. "I saw your story on television," he said. I knew your wife." Ethan looked surprised. The man carefully unfolded a faded photograph. Rachel stood beside him at a veterans hospital, both smiling. "My name is Walter Hayes," he said. 10 years ago, your wife spent every Saturday reading books to veterans who had no family." Ethan stared at the picture in disbelief. Another chapter of Rachel's life, one she had never talked about, was unfolding before him. Walter handed Ethan the envelope. "She asked me to give this to you if we ever met again." Ethan looked at the familiar handwriting on the front. It simply read, "When you finally understand why kindness matters." With trembling hands, he held the unopened letter against his heart. He realized Rachel's greatest legacy wasn't hidden in a single journal or a box of letters. It was the thousands of lives she had quietly touched, and the countless more who were now choosing kindness because of her example. As snowflakes drifted outside the windows of the Compass House, the laughter of children echoed through the building, and Ethan knew that Rachel's compass had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had led him home, not to a place, but to a purpose. The envelope from Walter Hayes sat on Ethan's desk for 3 days. He couldn't bring himself to open it. Every letter Rachel had left behind seemed to reveal another piece of the woman he thought he knew completely. Finally, on a quiet Sunday evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan carefully unfolded the yellowed paper. Rachel's familiar handwriting brought tears to his eyes. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, you've already discovered that I kept a few secrets. Not because I didn't trust you, because I wanted my kindness to stay quiet. Real kindness doesn't need applause. Walter is one of many people who taught me that every person carries an invisible battle. promise me something. If Noah ever wonders what kind of mother I was, don't tell him I was perfect. Tell him I tried. Teach him that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing love anyway. And if he ever grows into a man who helps someone expecting nothing in return, then I'll still be living through him. Love always. Rachel? Ethan wiped away his tears. The next morning, he read the letter aloud to Noah before school. The 10-year-old sat quietly, holding the paper in his hands. When Ethan finished, Noah looked up. Dad. Yeah, buddy? I think Mom already taught me. Ethan smiled softly. How? Noah shrugged. By leaving you all these letters. They're helping us even now. That afternoon, Noah asked if he could volunteer at the Compass House every Saturday. Instead of playing video games, Ethan's heart swelled with pride. You don't have to. I know. I want to. From that day on, Noah became the youngest volunteer at the center. He organized donated books, carried groceries for elderly visitors, and helped younger children with their homework. One rainy Saturday, an elderly woman named Mrs. Alvarez came into the Compass House. She looked embarrassed. My furnace stopped working, she whispered. I don't know how I'm going to afford the repairs. Before Ethan could answer, Noah quietly disappeared. 20 minutes later, he returned carrying a small glass jar. It was filled with crumpled dollar bills and loose change. Dad, this is my savings. I was going to buy a new bicycle. But Mrs. Alvarez needs heat more than I need another bike. The room fell silent. Mrs. Alvarez burst into tears. Ethan knelt beside his son. You don't have to give all of it. Noah smiled. Mom said helping people is how she keeps living. Ethan couldn't speak. Word of Noah's selfless act spread throughout the town. The very next day, the local hardware store owner repaired Mrs. Alvarez's furnace free of charge. A bicycle shop owner, after hearing Noah's story, surprised him with a brand new mountain bike. Attached to the handlebars was a note. Kindness always finds its way back. Noah hugged his father tightly. I wasn't helping to get a bike. I know, Ethan said with a smile. That's exactly why you deserved one. A few weeks later, the Compass House celebrated its first anniversary. More than 500 people gathered outside. Families who had been helped stood alongside volunteers. Firefighters, teachers, nurses, and veterans. Claire stepped onto the small stage. I have someone special I'd like you all to meet. She called Noah forward. The shy boy walked up, his cheeks turning bright red as the crowd applauded. Claire handed him a brand new leather journal. The cover was embossed with a silver compass and a tiny lavender flower. This journal belongs to you now, she said. No, it belongs to the next generation. She smiled through tears. Your mother started the first one. Now it's your turn to keep writing stories of hope. Noah looked at the blank first page. Then he slowly wrote, My mom taught people to be kind. My dad taught me how to keep that kindness alive. When Ethan read those words, he wrapped his son in a tight embrace. Looking up at the sky, he whispered, We're keeping our promise, Rachel. And somehow, with the evening sun shining through the clouds, it felt as though she already knew. 5 years passed. The little storefront that had once been the Compass House had grown into something far bigger than anyone had imagined. There were now 23 Compass Houses across the United States, from Illinois and Colorado to Texas, Georgia, Ohio, and Oregon. Each one followed the same simple mission Rachel had written years before. Hope grows when it's shared. No one paid to receive help. No one was turned away. Thousands of volunteers donated their time, proving that kindness could spread farther than anyone expected. Noah finds his calling. Noah was now 15. Tall, thoughtful, and quietly confident. He had inherited his father's calm nature and Rachel's compassionate heart. Every Saturday, he mentored younger children at the Compass House. One afternoon, a shy 12-year-old boy named Mason walked in carrying a backpack with a broken zipper. He barely spoke. His family had recently lost their home in a fire. The experience reminded Ethan of his own work as a firefighter and of how quickly life could change. Noah sat beside Mason. You don't have to talk today, he said gently. We can just shoot some basketball. For weeks, that's all they did. No questions. No pressure. Just basketball. Little by little, Mason smiled again. One evening, his grandmother pulled Ethan aside. "I haven't heard him laugh since the fire," she whispered through tears. "Your son gave me my grandson back." Ethan looked across the gym, watching Noah encourage Mason after a missed shot. At that moment, he realized Rachel's greatest gift had never been the letters. It was the example she had left behind, an example Noah was now living every day. A call from Washington. One spring morning, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes?" "My name is Rebecca Collins. I'm calling from Washington, D.C. We'd like to invite you and your family to the National Volunteer Leadership Summit." Ethan frowned. There must be some mistake. There isn't. The Compass House movement has inspired communities across the country. We'd like to recognize Rachel Carter's legacy. Ethan was speechless. Months later, the entire family traveled to Washington. Claire, the 4 girls, now lively preteens, and Noah stood proudly beside Ethan as they entered a grand ballroom filled with community leaders, teachers, firefighters, nurses, veterans, and volunteers from every state. When Ethan's name was announced, the audience rose in a standing ovation. He walked slowly to the stage, carrying the original leather journal Rachel had started years ago. Looking out over the crowd, he smiled. "I used to believe this journal belonged to my late wife." He paused. "I was wrong." He held it high. "It belongs to every person who has ever chosen kindness over indifference." The room erupted in applause. One last surprise. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached Ethan. She introduced herself as Eleanor Brooks. "I worked with Rachel years ago at the hospital." She handed Ethan a small envelope. "I've been waiting a long time to give you this." Inside was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a drawing. Crayon marks covered the page. At the top, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "My hero Rachel." On the back, Rachel had written a single sentence. "If one child grows up believing kindness is strength, then I've lived a wonderful life." Ethan smiled through tears. He looked across the room at Noah, who was helping Mason feel comfortable among the crowd. Then he looked at Claire's 4 daughters, now volunteering with younger children and collecting stories for the newest Compass House journal. Rachel's dream had come true, not because she had lived long enough to see it, but because the people she inspired refused to let it end. As the family left the ballroom together, Ethan looked toward the evening sky. "Can you see this, Rachel?" he whispered. A gentle breeze rustled the trees lining the street. He smiled. "I think you can." And for the first time in many years, the pain of losing her no longer outweighed the joy of having loved her. Her story wasn't ending. It was being written every single day by the people whose lives she had quietly changed. 10 years later, on a warm June afternoon, hundreds of people gathered in Maplewood for the grand opening of the Rachel Carter National Center for Kindness, the small Compass House that had begun with one journal, and one promise had grown into a nationwide nonprofit with more than 100 community centers across the United States. Millions of meals had been served, thousands of scholarships awarded, and countless families had found hope during their darkest moments. The front lawn was filled with children laughing, volunteers hugging one another, firefighters in uniform, nurses, teachers, veterans, and families whose lives had been changed. A large bronze statue stood at the entrance. It wasn't of a famous politician or celebrity. It was of a young woman sitting on a park bench with an open journal in her lap and a gentle smile on her face. At the base of the statue were Rachel's words, "Hope grows when it's shared." A full-circle moment. Ethan, now with silver beginning to show in his hair, stood beside Claire. Their hands were intertwined. Several years earlier, after taking time to heal and honoring Rachel's memory, they had fallen in love. Their relationship had never been about replacing Rachel. It had been built on the kindness Rachel had planted in both of their hearts. Friends and family surrounded them as the officiant smiled. "Today we're not only opening a new center, we're also celebrating something even more special." The crowd applauded as Ethan and Claire renewed the vows they had exchanged in a small private ceremony years before, this time surrounded by everyone they loved. When the officiant asked if anyone wished to say a few words, Noah stepped forward. Now a young man preparing to become a firefighter like his father, he unfolded a worn piece of paper. "It isn't my speech," he said with a smile. "It's my mom's." The crowd grew silent. He read the final letter Rachel had written for him. "My sweet Noah, if you're old enough to read this, then you've already discovered something important. Life isn't measured by how many years we get. It's measured by how many hearts we touch. Be brave enough to forgive, strong enough to ask for help, and kind enough to notice the people everyone else overlooks. If you become that man, I'll never truly be gone. Love always. Mom." By the time Noah finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. He folded the letter carefully and looked at Ethan. "Dad, everything good in my life started because you chose to keep Mom's promise instead of your pain." Ethan embraced his son as the crowd applauded. The last page. Later that afternoon, inside the New Center's library, the original leather journal was displayed in a glass case. Next to it lay the newest volume. It had just one blank page remaining. Claire smiled. "I think it's time." She handed the journal to Ethan. Instead of writing, Ethan passed it to Noah. "No, this belongs to your generation now." Noah picked up the pen. He thought about his mother, whom he had never truly known. He thought about his father, who had taught him resilience. He thought about Claire and the 4 girls, who had become the sisters he never expected to have. Then he wrote, "A stranger once recognized a tattoo in a park. That single moment connected 2 families, healed broken hearts, and reminded us that one act of kindness can echo for generations. If you're reading this, don't wait for the perfect moment to help someone. Today might become the story that changes someone else's life forever." He signed his name, closed the journal, and smiled. One final sign. As the celebration ended, everyone released hundreds of biodegradable, lavender-colored balloons into the bright blue sky. A gentle breeze carried them upward. Just then, a small monarch butterfly landed softly on the bronze compass engraved beside Rachel's statue. Little Sophie, now a college student studying to become a pediatric nurse, looked up and whispered, "Hi, Rachel." The butterfly lingered for a few seconds before fluttering into the summer sky. No one said a word. They simply smiled, because some things didn't need explaining. They only needed to be felt. Ethan wrapped an arm around Claire. Noah stood beside them. Emma, Lily, Grace, and Sophie laughed together as children ran across the lawn outside the Compass House. It wasn't the family Ethan had imagined years ago. It was the family life had lovingly built for him. And in that moment, he finally understood the meaning of the tiny compass tattoo Rachel had designed long ago. It had never been about finding a place. It had always been about finding your way back to love. The end. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment telling us what part moved you the most. Your support helps us continue sharing heartwarming stories that inspire kindness, hope, and second chances. Thank you for watching.